systems and see how they can capture this information. So they charge you big bucks for this. Everybody's going out and buying toilet paper and all the milk and eggs gone, right? So maybe we can talk to the people and say, look, this is the worst case, this is the best case. Try to be considerate towards people. So the more open you are to giving them information, people are worried about their jobs in the workplace. So when they see that you're trying to lay off people, they're going to think that they're going to be the next, and they're going to start feeling the anxiety and starting rumors. So it says openly discuss the worst case, right? Emphasize, what's going to happen. Emphasize the fact that you're still there, that you'll give them a good reference, that you will, help them get a new job, whatever it takes. And that will help reduce the rumor. All right, we do a lot of this, which is emails, Instagrams, right? Text messaging. And sometimes we tend to do the push button or send button too fast without making sure that all of the, I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And as a result, you will see that, we make mistakes. And the opposite side of that is we have an information overload, which means there's too much information coming at us. And I can guarantee this because I can see it. And sometimes makes it difficult for us to really personalize our attention to the people we care about, even though we want to. There's too much coming, at us, and there's not enough time in the day to do it. So emojis and all these good things that we have available to us today are good, but please make sure that when you're doing formal communication that you don't go to this direction, right? You go more formal, use your words rather than emojis. All right, intranet, extranet, and video conferencing. Video conferencing is very similar to what we're doing right now, right? I'm using electronic means to communicate with you, and you can respond, you can hear me. So it's almost a substitute, right? It's a darn good substitute for being there in person. The only negative is I don't see you face to face. I don't see your emotions. I don't see your body language. And neither do you see mine. Okay, so that's bad. Intranet is basically a private organization-wide information network. So if I have, let's say I'm Target, and I have many Targets all over the country, so it's just for Target employees, there's an intranet. So they're not just one location, but connected with every Target in the country. That's an intranet. Extranet is information network. So we'll take the same example of Target, but extranet would include people like suppliers and customers being able to get onto the website of Target and do what they need to. For example, suppliers can see if their inventory of the goods that they supply is going down. Right now is a critical time, right? They're looking to see when do we need to replenish certain goods or produce or whatever it is. And so that's the extranet. Okay, knowledge management is another key component that has come about as a result of technology. So since we've had the internet and the explosion of the World Wide Web, we have had this fear in the organization that as our people become older and they leave, we're going to lose a lot of the tribal knowledge that we had, had over a period of time collected, and that people were there, they were staying with us, till they retired, and we had time to train someone. Now, the millennials and the, all the other generations, they don't have that commitment, and neither do the companies. They don't want to keep you there forever. So as a result, you'll see a lot of people changing jobs more often. And when they leave with them the experience. And so what knowledge management does is bring back into, I would say it brings some sort of control over, the knowledge leaving and going out the door with the employee that's leaving or retiring or is sick and cannot work, etc. So knowledge management basically captures what's happening in the organization within a person's job category and saves the information. So it's like artificial intelligence, but only it's mapped out for individual workers. And so captured information is kept until it is required to be used for the organization's effectiveness in the future. Okay. Now, many companies, consulting companies like Price Waterhouse, KPMG, they do the architecture for knowledge management. In fact, they'll do a needs analysis. They'll go look at the way the company is already networked within their systems and see how they can capture this information. So they charge you big bucks for this. Okay. All right. So that was knowledge management. This one is about the communication channel. What channel are we using to communicate? And the more face-to-face connections you have, the richer the channel. So you can see video conferencing and face-to-face conversations are rated as the higher or the better channels of communication, as compared to a letter being sent by mail, a memo being sent by email. Okay, so that would be the low richness. Now, as in everything else, when we communicate, we make mistakes. We have what we call filtering biases. We manipulate information so that the sender only hears what we want them to hear. Or when we hear something, we selectively pick what we want to hear, instead of the whole message. For example, on this first communication that we got about the non-instructional days, all the students were very sure that they knew that it meant no instruction means they wouldn't have to deal with a lecture. Whereas instructors were thinking, oh, they have to do a lecture. And you could see the communication come through, and finally somebody had to put their foot down and say, you're right, instructors, back off, you don't have to do a lecture on Monday or Thursday. So selective perception and selective communication. And we talked about information overload as a result of the technology changes that have happened in our lives. You can see even you and I trying to keep up with the communication that's coming in the last week from our own school. Different layers, right? You have the president communicating, you have the provost communicating, you have your departments, your deans, and then you have your instructors, right? So there's so many things happening that sometimes it feels like it's too much, that you don't know which one to listen to. Of course, there's many barriers to communication. As a global citizen, language is a huge barrier, right? I speak English, maybe someone who I'm sitting with doesn't speak a lick of English. And so if I don't know their language and they don't know mine, it's difficult to communicate. Emotions helps us, right? They help us. If I can emotionally present how I'm feeling or act it, maybe they'll know what I'm feeling. But really, it's difficult to have a conversation with just that. So language is something that, we don't have a common language for the world, even though we try to make English the common language. But ask France, they will say French should be the common language, right? Okay. Many people are very apprehensive, and likely so, because communication with people you don't know, or people who have more power than you, people who have your future in their hands, probably make you nervous, and so anxiety about oral communication or even written communication is a real thing, and you need to be aware of it. Okay, so when this is just a tidbit about, what people used to say. When men talk, it's news, but when women talk, it's gossip. Do you believe it? Well, it is true. There is some truth to that. Not that women gossip, but women use communication for different reasons than men. So men talk to emphasize their status, power, and independence. Men talk to complain that women talk on and on. Men talk to offer solutions and to boast about their accomplishments. Women, on the other hand, will speak to establish connection and intimacy, not intimacy in the way we relationship intimacy. No, they're just trying to get to know this person closer. Criticize men for not listening, speak of problems so they can promote closeness. So women tend to talk about their issues, and they usually feel that if they talk about them, that it will be shared by someone else, and that sharing will lessen their burden. Okay, and express regret. Women tend to be the ones to say sorry first. I don't know why, but I see it more often than I see men say sorry. Okay. And I am not going to go much further in this one. This says, we need to be politically correct. Right now, people are extremely sensitive to the words that we used to use. And now we're saying, no, that's not good. We need to be more sensitive. So I'm going to move on with that. You can read it at your own. It's not part of your exam. All right. Cross-cultural communication. When you're communicating with people from different cultures, please assume that there are differences. Don't assume that they know everything the way you know it. So be patient, right? Assume that there is some difference before you can prove that there's similarity. Emphasize description rather than interpretation or evaluation. Means don't judge. Practice empathy. If they don't speak the language as well as you, or they have an accent that's difficult, practice empathy. Treat your interpretation as a working hypothesis rather than assuming that it's a judgment, right? That's it, you're done. You've heard it and you're moving on. Okay, communication such as using your hands to, in different countries, it means different things. I'm going to move on because we've got a little time. Victory sign could sometimes be misconstrued in other countries, right? As it says in this picture, it's not a positive. Many cultures have very high context in the way they speak. Cultures that rely heavily on non-verbal communication means they, like, for example, if you're going to Japan, they bow when they greet people. Why? Because they want to show reverence. Whereas in the United States, we used to shake hands. Now, even that is now a problem, right? We fist, not a fist anymore. What is it? Elbow bump? Anyways, so the more context or more actions that are used in greeting people, the higher the context in the culture. Low context culture, such as North America, Canada, right? Don't use a lot of, bending, bowing, joining of hands, etc., to show when they're talking to people. So here's a list of people from different cultures, like Chinese, Asian countries are more in the high context, whereas more European and North Americans are in the very low context. We only use our words when we communicate. We don't use our bodies. Okay, so that ends 11. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, I'm going to find it, not to worry. I'll get back in just a minute, so I'm not leaving yet. All right, so there's number 12. So chapter 12 is about leadership. So I'm going to allow you to see this in just a minute. So leadership, it's an important chapter because, we all are here in management school because at some point we want to be leaders of our organization, leaders of our community, leaders of our nation. You can see that leadership is about influencing a group towards achieving a goal, whereas there's a difference in how management behaves. Management is more about using their authority or title or position to get their workers to do what they want, so get compliance. So there's a distinct difference in the way we see leaders and their actions versus how we see managers and what they need to do in order to achieve their goals. So this is not a list that I want you to memorize, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what, if you use a verb, or I'm sorry, an adjective, and you look at your, how the leaders and managers behave, you'll see that, definitely there's a difference between leaders and managers. Here's a question that's been debated over the ages. Are all leaders born, or can they be made? Made through training, made through experience, made through mentorship. So can they be, so think about this. The traits theory suggests that personality, your personality, your social persona, your physical appearance, your intellectual traits, all can differentiate you from others. And so in that same way, you can differentiate a leader based on their traits, such as personality, social, physical, and intellectual traits. And we can sort of take one person and say, oh yeah, that one looks like a leader, acts like a leader, whereas this one doesn't. So what are some of these traits that we look at? Ambition, energy, desire to lead, integrity, honesty, self-confidence, intelligence. High self-monitoring means being self-aware and being able to monitor yourself. And I think we talked about self-monitoring earlier. So job relevant knowledge, knowing and wanting to acquire knowledge so that you become the expert, is also a leadership trait, because you don't want to be the one standing up in front of a whole crowd and not knowing the answers. Because if you are standing in front of people, and you can see this happening in our own government now with this coronavirus, sometimes, the reporters will ask one of our senior executives in our government, or one of our senators, or even our president, what is this going to do for our country, or how is it going to affect our country? And instead of giving answers that are wrong, I think even the senior most people should defer to the person who's an expert on this subject, because we know that if you're not a doctor, you're not going to know the answer. And if you know the answer, it may not be a complete answer. And so sometimes you got to put your ego aside for the benefit of the people. So what do managers do? They direct, they control, they plan, they organize, they implement, enforce, schedule, budget. So all these words that you see are definitely manage, right? Now, if you look at this one, is this a leader or manager? Leader, because guess what? The first word in there is influence. Create a vision, challenge people to do better, right? So these are words that we could, use to describe a leader. So we just talked about the traits theory. There are some limitations within this theory, and there are people who don't believe in it. Why is that? Well, because they're saying there are no universal traits, such as personality, such as desire to lead, that we can control or we can measure, that predicts leadership in all situations. We can't, I can't take, let's say, 10 world leaders from the last 10 years and say, okay, show me one common thing among all of them. It's impossible to find, these traits Therefore, I think we all need to be aware that being a leader calls upon you being aware of the situation and the needs of the people around you. What do the people need? When your heart is caring enough about the people, you will look at the situation and make your judgment, and therefore you'll become a good leader. If you do not reach into your heart and you do not understand the plight of the people and what they need, but are making judgments on what you need, you are not going to be seen as a good leader. So selflessness is the key to leadership. Knowing your way is good, right? So it says traits predict behavior rather than better in weak rather than strong situations. And there's unclear evidence of the cause and effect of relationship of leadership and traits. So in other words, they couldn't statistically come up with anything that says this is a leader, these are the traits that you must have to become a leader. And therefore, many people fight the understanding that certain leaders must have certain characteristics. But I believe, having studied this subject for a long time, that leaders must be situationally aware and must come up with a plan for that particular situation. So they're like custom tailors. If a fat person comes to you, you want to be able to tailor that suit to fit that fat person. Or if a skinny person come with nothing but bones, you're going to be able to make them look good. And that's wherein lies your strength as a leader, right? Being able to cater to the individual. Big Five personality, we talked about this in chapter 4. And I think when you took the test, if you took it from my manual test that I gave you, you may have seen this, where you scored yourself for extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotionally stable, open to experience. These are called the Big Five personality types. And if you scored high on this, your score was above 50% of the total score in one or many of these traits, then you have what it takes to be a good leader. These are good predictors of leadership. But there's no guarantee. All right. Because we talked about the traits theory, we're going to now say, well, who are those people who don't believe that leaders need to have certain personality and certain intelligence and certain social understanding? Well, those are people called the behavior theorists, which means they believe that leadership is a skill, it's a practice, and that you can be trained on how to be a good leader. So think about these things. There's research that is constantly happening on this to prove which side is right. So the behavior theorists say that specific behaviors differentiate leaders from non-leaders, or from leaders and managers. So if you have a certain type of behavior, I can identify that behavior and say, hey, you're a leader. So traits theory says, no, you're born with it. Behavior theory says, no, we can help you, we can train you, we can show you the way to become a leader. So which one do you believe in? Maybe there's a little 50-50 in there, right? All right, couple of studies that were done. Ohio State says, that they looked at, over 500 leaders, and they checked, did a survey with leaders to find out what they do. What are some of the key characteristics of their jobs, how they behave, what they do on a daily basis. And they found out that the two most important things that they found in the study were leaders who initiated structure and leaders who showed consideration for employees and the people around them. What does that mean? Initiating structure says the extent to which the leader is likely to identify, what is your role, show you how that role can be, beneficial in attaining the goals of the company. So basically developing a structure, telling you what to do kind of thing. The second consideration is having that empathy, that relationship, that trust between people, so that they can understand their subordinates, they can understand and help them. So having consideration for them. So remember this, because we'll kind of play with this for a couple more slides. So, when one university that is well known in the US comes up with a study, somebody else has to replicate it to prove them either right or wrong. And so University of Michigan repeated this form of study with different leaders. So once again, hundreds of leaders were surveyed, and they found in the survey that leaders were mostly either employee-oriented and or production-oriented. All right, so let's check back on the last slide, right? What was that? It said they had consideration for people, or they were very, that they initiated structure. And let's see if it fits in any one of these. Consideration for people fits in the employee orientation, right? Employee-oriented leader does what? Emphasizes interpersonal relations, takes personal interest in people, cares about people. And what does the production-oriented leader do? He or she emphasizes technical skills or tasks and the job, right? What do you need to do? So pretty much the findings are very similar. Okay, now Blake and Martin did a study to show what is the best way to be. Should you be more employee-oriented, or should you be more goal or production-oriented? And he said, a good leader really needs to look at both and have a little bit of both. So a 50-50 characteristic would be good, rather than, going to an extreme. And I have seen this. If you're too employee-oriented, you can lose as a result of employees sort of leaning on you too much and not getting anything done. On the other hand, if you're not at all employee-oriented, you're just worried about the goals like Steve Jobs used to be, people hate you and they will not do anything to help you. All right, so leaders do the right things. Managers do things right. That's what Peter Drucker said. So it's a very powerful statement. So when the United States comes up with 2 studies on leadership and publishes it, guess what? The Europeans want to get a piece of the action too. And so Scandinavian studies did something similar to try to figure out, what is are there only 2 production-oriented versus people-oriented leaders, or is there a different component, or can they come up with something different? And so they did this similar survey, and what they saw, and because this survey was done a little bit after, where you saw, in fact, the lady in this picture is Andrea Jung, or Andrea Young. She was she's no longer the CEO of Avon. She used to be the CEO of Avon from 2000, I think 10, probably until 2000, maybe even sooner, maybe 2005 to 2012, or sometime around there. And what she was able to do was really look at the company as you know it, right? Avon used to have representatives that came to your door, dropped off a book, you picked up the phone, you contacted them, they brought you the stuff. And so the product was good, but their sales were kind of, so-so. And so Andrea decided to look at this and incorporate the internet. And so all of a sudden, the representatives don't have to go to your door. You can get online and use your representative to get what you want, but you've got everything. You don't have to print those books. You don't have to mail those books, etc. You just order online and it comes to your door. your reps can still bring you samples, etc. So she created a newer, updated model of, you know, the network marketing, and as a result, they showed people like her were extremely successful and good for the company, and that showed in this particular survey. It showed that leaders must not just look at employees or be caring about employees and or people. I'm sorry, employees and or products, but they must find new ways, experiment with new ideas, and gather knowledge and use that knowledge to implement change. And Andrea did that very successfully. And today, you know, Avon is really going gangbusters worldwide. We're not doing as much with Avon because we have so many other brands in this country, but in places like Africa and Asia, Avon is huge, and they're really doing great as a result of what she was able to accomplish. All right, there's a couple of theories. Contingency theory says that effective groups depend on a proper match between leaders' style of interacting with subordinates and the degree to which the situation gives control and influence to the leader. And that's called the contingency. It means in order for a leader to emerge in a situation, the overall group, in order for the group to accept the leader's message, the leader must have the right style of communication, the right style of interacting. Because if they come in and blast it all over, some people might go, wait, I don't want to hear it. But if they don't understand the people, so once again, Fiedler's contingency model says, you know, that there must be some understanding and acceptance by people for a leader to emerge. The LPC is called the least preferred coworker. It's another questionnaire that people use to measure whether a person is a task-oriented or a people-oriented leader. So that's an LPC is a survey that you can use, or you can take it yourself. All right. So Fiedler's model basically says that you must define the situation. What is the situation, and act accordingly. So leader-member relationships are important. If I'm the leader and you're the members of a group, the relationship we have, the relationship that has trust, that believes that, you know, the leader is able to do good, to do right by them, that is an important important characteristic for the leader to present in order for the subordinates to accept the leader. Another thing that is critical in this theory is task structure, the degree to which, you know, the job assignments are clearly identified, clearly communicated, and procedurized. And finally, of course, you need to have the position power. Nobody can just emerge and say, I'm the leader. You've got to have a formal position given to you, right? Some sort of hierarchy that says you are the leader. So it includes leaders have to have the power to hire, fire, discipline, etc., right? And as a result, you know that they can make the difference. All right, so moving on. Cognitive resource theory is another theory, and this one says that stress can be unfavorable. So stress can unfavorably affect a situation, and that intelligence and experience can lessen the influence of stress on the leader. So how stress and experience influences you know, a leader's actions. So let's look at what this chart has to say. It says the less intelligent individuals perform better in leadership roles under high stress than those who are more intelligent. So if a leader is not that intelligent, maybe they're pretty new to the job, they don't have much experience, not much intelligent, they don't have a great education, then the stress is just pushing them to go do their job. However, if you are intelligent and you know what it's supposed to be, and somebody's pushing you too hard, you're going to say, back the hell off, right? So that's what they're saying, is that stress does not help people who are intelligent. All right. And I can vouch for that. Many people I know who are highly intelligent, when they see a stressful situation, they, you can see the reaction is terrible. All right. Less experienced people, so people who have not been in the job for a long time, perform well in leadership roles under low stress, which means that if you haven't been working for a long time in the same position and you see a little bit of stress, you might still continue to do your job. But people who have a lot of experience, they've been there, done that, they know how it's done. And if you're getting pressure, suddenly these folks, even if it's low amount of pressure or stress, these people are going to say, wait a minute, I know my job, why are you pushing me? So they're not going to accept that kind of push. Okay? All right. So once again, the same theory, right? Fiedler's cognitive resource theory says, and he wrote the initial theory and then he refined it, means he improved upon it. He said, focuses on stress as an enemy of rational behavior or rationality. So therefore it creates unfavorable conditions in the workplace. So stress and intelligence and stress and experience can cause very unfavorable outcomes. A leader's intelligence and experience influences his or her reaction to that stress. Okay, so pretty much that's what we said, stress levels, intelligence level, and their level of experience. Okay, this is a very important slide, so please pay attention to this. This is known as the Hershey-Blanchard situational leadership theory, or SLT. However, this theory is extremely useful in many situations that you will be in the workplace. So let me explain why. So the green portion of the rectangle says followers' readiness, ability, and willingness. The blue portion says leaders' decreasing need for support and supervision. So this is what it says, basically. It says when you have employees that are unwilling and unable, so look at the green, let's look at the green portion where my cursor is, unable and unwilling to work. The amount of information, amount of effort the leader has to put in is very high, right? Lots of work being done by the leader. They have to be extremely directive. Look at this word below. It says the leader has to be direct, tell them exactly what they need to do. Why? Because the people are unwilling and unable. They don't have the skills. Moving on, if you go to the right, people who are unable, they don't have the skills, but they're willing. They've got a great attitude. Look at the amount of work that the leader has to do. Well, they're putting in some, and the leader's putting in some, maybe 50-50, right? Or 60-40, right? 60 for the leaders, 40 for the employee. And so basically what they're doing is there's a high task and relationship orientation, means people are willing to listen. People are open to suggestion on how to do the job. Next. When you have people that are unable and unwilling, then the unable and unwilling, what happens? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I meant able. The people are very able, means they have the skills, but they may not have a great attitude. Because they have skills, they can still do a large portion of the work. Their attitude might be the thing that is sort of, preventing them from doing a good job. Therefore, the leader must be more supportive and participative. Why? If you stroke these folks' egos, they might be able to be translated from being, bad attitude to better attitude or good attitude. Okay, the last one. Here's who you really need to hire. You need to hire people that are able to make sure that they have the skills to do the job. And you need to hire people that have great attitudes, that are willing to do the job. And so in that case, you've got a win-win, because there's very little or nothing that the leader needs to do. They just watch, sit back, relax, give credit, and all the work is done by someone else. So this, when we flip this chart a little bit, we can still see, should a manager be a micromanager? Should a leader be a micro leader? Why? Only when the people are unable and unwilling. But as the situation changes, maybe as they get more training and they get more, coaching, you might see, or counseling here, you might see more willingness and more ability, and maybe even experience helps people, with their job skills. And so slowly but surely, you've converted the people to more willing participants in the job, and therefore the leader starts by being very direct, by telling people what to do, to a very supportive role, to a monitoring role where they just let it go and leave it alone. So try to apply that to your workplace. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of, I don't know what it is, yogurt with bio something in here. I don't know what it is. Probiotics, there you go. And it tastes like crap. Okay, leader-member exchange theory. This is another theory called the LMX theory, LMX, leader-member exchange. And what this is saying is leaders create, in groups and out groups with subordinates. In other words, there's no way a leader can really take everyone in the organization and make them in the in-group, put them in the in-group, communicate with them directly. No. There's one leader, there's many employees. So most likely they will bring in just the key people, key managers, key executives into the in-group. So what this theory is saying is people who are in the in-group have the confidence of the leader, there's trust, there's a stronger relationship with the leader, and as a result, there's less turnover. People will not leave because they're satisfied, right? They have great job satisfaction. They're in the know of the leader. They're in the in-group. The same thing happens with your group members. Most of us think that the people we know more that are within our group are more capable than people outside because we don't really know them. And so what happens is you have more trust, especially for those people who are, within your group. Another theory that you need to know is path goal theory. And this theory says that leaders' job to assist followers in attaining their goals. If the leader knows the way on how to do a job, then it is their responsibility to show the way, to provide direction, to provide support, to make sure that the goals are being accomplished by, like the picture shows you, people who are at the bottom, bring them up, show them, train them, etc. All right, so what does the path goal theory involve? It involves leaders' behavior, what style they use to communicate, whether they're using that, directive, participative, right, supportive style or mentoring style, or their environment. What is the factor, the contingency? What are the subordinates like? Do they believe they can do the job? Do they have the experience, the ability? All of that equals to what the outcomes are going to be in this particular job or project, right? So that's what the theory is talking about, is that there's a whole bunch of complex stuff going on to connect leaders and great success. It's not automatic. Next theory is leader participation model. Leader participation basically says that leaders must provide a set of rules to determine the form and the amount of participative decision making in different situations. So what are the rules that they talk about? Directive leaders lets people know what to expect. Supportive leaders, friendly and shows concern. Participative leaders seek consensus. And achievement-oriented leaders set goals and expect followers to perform. So those are some of the behaviors. Well, I have a different take on it. I say, please know who you are, know where you're going, determine how to get there, and then act like you've arrived. I'm not sure if I've already talked to you about this, which I think I have, but if I haven't, I'll get back to this after our exam, because I want to really catch those things that are going to be important for your exam. So I'm moving on. Trust is an important thing for the leaders. And in order to build the trust, you must be competent. You must show consistency in your action. You must be loyal, and you must be open, right? So trust is based on history, means performing regularly and consistently, doing what you said you're going to do. If you promise something, you must deliver it. So it's based on trust. Trust is based on historic performance, means past performance. However, you can lose trust very easily in a split second, right? One action can really take that trust away. So what are some of the key dimensions of trust? Integrity, competence, consistency, loyalty, and openness. Why is that important? Well, because leaders are at the top of the organizations, and we are all looking at their examples to move forward, right? We're looking. And if we don't trust the leader, and the leader doesn't show that they're trustworthy or that they have integrity, they're not consistent, we don't want to follow them. All right, so let's pass this. 3 types of trust. Deterrent-based trust, which means it's a fear-based trust. You're going to trust somebody because you're afraid that if you don't do what they tell you, you might be fired. Knowledge-based, it's because, like right now, Dr. Fauci is the person with the knowledge on the coronavirus. So we might not listen to our president and our senators and our Congress people, but we will listen to Dr. Fauci when he speaks. And that's knowledge-based trust. Identification, trust based on mutual understanding of each other's intentions and appreciation of others' wants and desires. I'd say our trust between you and me is more identification, because you know that I'm there for the right reasons. You know that I will do the right things to get you through this. And if you don't have that trust with me, then we've got a problem. It's the same thing you'll have with your parents, right? They have taken care of you up to this point. So they really care about your outcomes. They care about your well-being. So they're not going to do anything that'll hurt you. I mean, there are some sociopaths, right? But we're not going to talk about them today. All right, so principles of trust. It says, mistrust drives out trust. Trust begets trust. When your company is growing fast, now this is something that New Gen and you can apply this to NewGen. They were growing so fast that it sort of masked all the problems they were having among, between people. So decline or downsizing, whenever there's a decline in your company, you can see it now. All of a sudden there's layoffs. People are not going to work because there's nothing to do. Their company is closed down or shut down because of this coronavirus. So you'll see more mistrust, more scared, more fear. I even heard some of my neighbors are going out and buying guns, which is scary, right? I said, why are you doing that? How is the gun going to help you feed your family? Oh, well, we don't want anybody to come into our house and steal or, hurt us. I'm like, okay, whatever. So trust, when there's trust between people, it increases cohesion. Mistrust, when there's mistrust in a group, what happens? They self-destruct. And mistrust generally produces or reduces productivity. All right. Framing is how we use our language to say something that we already know, but someone is going to put that in words that make sense for us, that shapes new meaning, right? So that's what Martin Luther King did when he did the speech, I have a dream. And those are charismatic leaders who can really put words and words that symbolize, words that create a vision in the eyes and minds of the people. So inspiration is what they're doing here, right? Inspirational approaches to leadership. Charismatic leadership theory says followers make attribution of heroics. So we give credit to leaders for being heroes because of their extraordinary abilities. Because we can observe from their language or from their selflessness that they are trying to do the right thing. Like Gandhi, Steve Jobs. Well, I don't know about Steve Jobs. Gandhi, Mandela, JFK, and maybe even Steve Jobs to some degree towards the end. He really did change a little bit. So what is charisma about, right? It's articulating a vision, stating your expectation goals, setting high expectations for your followers, conveying a new set of values, and making personal sacrifice. That's important. You're not always considering yourself. You're being selfless. Okay, let's see what else this says. Level 5 leaders they're the ones who possess more than just charisma. They are the ones who have this fifth dimension, which is a paradoxical blend of personal humility and professional will. In addition to the 4 basic leadership qualities of team building skills, managerial competence, ability to stimulate others to high performance, those are some of the skills, but mostly people like, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Mandela, Martin Luther King, when you look back at, why you consider them to be leaders, you will see that they were humble beyond, their need to be humble. They didn't care that they were not wearing, $10,000 suits when they could afford it. They cared that, that the $10,000 went to someone who really needed it. They were willing to sacrifice their own safety for the improvement of people's lives. Okay, all right. 2 important words here: transactional leaders and transformational leaders. Transactional leaders are basically give and take, transact, which means they'll either punish you for not doing something or reward you for doing something, and therefore you'll do what you are told to do. That tells me it's a manager. Transactional. Transformational is a real leader because they're appealing to your sense of intellect, right? They're appealing to your intellect. They're using inspirational words. They're showing you the vision beyond what you can see. They're stimulating your intellectual senses to tell you what you need to do without pushing you, without coercing you. Okay, so transformation is about transforming your mind and your heart into believing in what needs to get done. Very important, emotional intelligence. What is this? Well, we've talked about this before, but once again, it says elements of emotional intelligence. There's 4 of them: self-awareness, self-management, managing your own emotions, self-motivation, empathy, knowing the emotions of others and being able to empathize with them. That's what it means. Being able to socially connect with people who, whatever the situation is. So that's what emotional intelligence is, especially for leaders. Mentoring, you can read through this. Self-leadership, leave that alone. Let's see, ethical leaders. Okay, it says an ethical leader works to positively change the attitudes and behavior of employees, engage in socially constructive behaviors, and do not abuse power or use improper means to gain or attain their goals. Or long distance. So these are virtual leaders, people who are being leaders without being seen, right? Not face-to-face leaders. So can it be much different than in being face-to-face? And I think it's difficult to build trust when you don't see people face-to-face, but over time and consistency, you can. Okay. Last one I want to talk about is the attribution theory of leadership. I know that some of you probably have to get to another Zoom for another class. And if you leave, I will continue this till I finish and then post it online. Okay? So, and if you have questions about your study guide, please post it onto the study guide forum so that people will answer it for you. And when by the end of this, maybe by Sunday evening, I will post answers to it. But most likely Monday during our class time when we're not having a lecture, I will have posted all of those answers. Okay? All right. So attribution theory says that we as people see leaders and we credit them with certain heroics. We credit them with greatness. It says leadership is merely an attribution that people give you, that people give you credit, that people see you as somebody bigger than who you are. Why? Because you take charge during a certain bad situation, because you're selfless, because you're trustworthy, because you care. So leaders are intelligent, outgoing, strong verbal skills, aggressive, understanding, and industrious. Effective leaders are perceived as consistent, unwavering in their decision, and effective leaders project the appearance of being leaders, so they don't back down too easily. How do we get good leaders? In our workplace, the best way to get good leaders is to make sure your selection process, that is when you're hiring people, make sure that everybody you hire could potentially be one of your leaders. Therefore, look for leadership skills. And secondly, you will train them. So there's plenty of schooling that's available on how to be a good leader, including this class is one of them. There's the leadership class, which is called 443, which I teach also. And in all these cases, a lot of this is about understanding yourself, and a lot of this is about wanting to change, wanting to understand other people, wanting to be kind and caring about other people, right? So it's not impossible for anyone who wants to be a good leader to become a leader. But it helps to have charisma, it helps to have a great outgoing personality, confidence, etc. And that, my friends, is the end of our 12th chapter. So let's see if there's anyone who still is still left and has any questions. Let's see what you have on the chat.
The test is on the 25th at 5:30, right?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, gun stores are empty. You're right. The exam is on the 25th, which is on Wednesday the 25th. Thursday is the 26th.
And it'll be online through Titanium?
Yes, so basically what you'll do, let me share this with you. Resume, and let me get out of this. New screen, let's go to this one. So, okay, so when you, let's see, so go down to, I think it's below, yeah, there you go. Topic 4. I will move that. I will change that title, and I'll call it multiple choice exams. Both your final and your midterm 2 will be here because we're not going back to campus, I heard, until the 22nd, and that ends our semester.
Okay, cool. And just curious on like, will there be like a session like where you'll go over the study guide, or is that it? Because I know it's supposed to be, you're not meeting next Monday.
We're not meeting next Sunday. The best way to go through your study guide would be to go to this forum that I've created called the Study Guide Forum right here.
Yeah.
And post your questions, and people who know the answers will post their answers from your class or from your group. And then for those answers that are just not either correct or need more explanation, I will intervene and answer them.
Okay, thank you.
That way, we don't have anything that's left unanswered. Okay, so it's just as good or maybe even better than me speaking it out loudly and you trying to take notes versus, you know, it being written. Okay?
Okay.
All right, who else has a question? Gun stores are empty. I don't need one. I can kill anyone who comes to my house and tries to rob me. Let's see what else. Awesome. Okay. So those are the only questions. I appreciate you all. Your patience was highly appreciated with all the changes that they're making. And remember, dynamic situation, things could change. So keep